So this unfolding that we are speaking of, it is not something that is happening to the me. It is not a self-improvement program. The most incredible grace is that we are not being guided to make a better me, because to make a better me is not the way to freedom. That we are offered the big picture is the grace, even if it feels to the mind like it doesn't make any sense. That it is the big picture and what the mind can't understand. That is the possibility of freedom. Because this freedom is freedom from the mind. It's freedom from the whole concept of being a separate me. And we cannot dilute it to make it palatable for the mind. But what happens is that there is a resonance in this truth, that the mind, because the mind is consciousness, the consciousness of the mind can recognize its own essence and start to quieten into its essence and out of its commitment to hold this concept of separation and to see the world and the life according to the me. We could say that the surrender that it takes, the natural surrender that it takes to happen, is a surrender into not knowing, a surrender into not understanding, a surrender into the glory of God without the mind knowing what that is or how to. It's about following the resonance of that which already remembers that there is something here in the presence of being that is already the remembrance of true nature, because you already are and you always have been yourself. There has never been any division or separation from the divine, from God, from innocence. Whatever word we want to use, it doesn't matter about the words. The mind can make many ways of wanting to divide. And really, it is about having an illumined awareness that can keep watching and noticing all of the ways that the mind wants to divide, to project, and hold the story of separation, to hold the story of being separate from the oneness, the one that is, from what is, right? So in great simplicity, we could say this moment, this holy moment, this openness, what is, just is right now. Is there anything here that is adverse to that, that is opposing that? And in the moment, it is to illuminate what is opposing this moment. And when we're speaking about this moment, we're not speaking about what is being spoken here. We're speaking about your moment, the moment, this now, the direct experience of this now. And wherever there is opposition, resistance, it is an opportunity to find out, and by illumination, by awareness's illumination, what is resisting this moment as it is. So the invitation here and the speaking is to illuminate, enliven the resonance of remembering, and to move as a flow of life that has the possibility of enlivening the remembering. Enlivening the remembering of that in you that already knows, right? It's not giving anything that's not already here. It's not possible to give anything to anyone because there is no one to give anything to anyone, right? That is the story of division. It is about remembrance, and the remembrance brings a recognition of where we are one, where there is no division, where there is no hierarchy, where there is no separation, no fragmentation, where there is no imbalance of power, right? Everything that we see is a reflection. It's like the life is a screen and it's reflecting the mind, the distortions of consciousness. And so the screen of the life is this opportunity to receive the reflection. And we could say to become more and more adept and skilled at not moving from the me, but illuminating as awareness and receiving the great opportunity to discover something that is arising, surfacing, in order to come to the light. Now we already are this great glorious truth, and the heart already knows. And yet there are these discordant patterns and the mind consciousness entangled in these discordant patterns that keep us holding the sense of separation and collaborating with this sense of separation, while all the while deeply longing for freedom, for love, for this truth to be known, to blossom, to flower in the heart. Of course, this truth is already here, and it is about illuminating all of the ways that we turn away from this truth through habits, through protections and conditionings, all of the ways that we turn away. And the ways that we turn away is through these resistances and protections, these learned habits, and all of the ways that we make this moment wrong. We cannot just create a new belief. There's absolutely no point just creating new beliefs or new concepts, trying to align with something through the intellect, through the mind consciousness. We have to come to the direct experience. And everything that we are speaking of is a constant invitation to come to the direct experience by meeting, receiving, transmuting, surfacing, and moving through the obscurations that keep us in like a mode of protection, a mode of like attack in a way. That there's this mode of constantly waiting for something to happen that we can fire, because we're in this very guarded protection. And so this constant invitation is to illuminate all of the ways that we divide and separate, so that the natural intelligence of life can flow into itself as pure consciousness, knowing itself, experiencing itself, and illuminating the recognition of itself, but in order to release its self-referencing, its self-interest, in order to completely release itself into the remembrance of total innocence, perfect love, God, the glory, divinity, whatever we want to call that. But it's about opening to this wholeness, this divine wholeness, this simple, natural wholeness, and awakening and opening through the discordant patterns of consciousness is the vehicle, the intelligent, natural vehicle for this to happen. We're releasing discordant patterns. We're releasing discordant patterns that the way that we know them is by certain resonances and vibrations in the nervous system, that we can be so present with what is happening in the nervous system in order to allow the surfacing of what we might call suppressed and repressed material, which is like these holding patterns, these vibrations, these resonances that are discordant, that act and play out as protections in order to release all of this so that we can live this glorious knowing of who we are, the knowing that is already alive in us, awake in us, so that we can truly live this. And the invitation is to constantly come to a more and more subtle adeptness at illuminating and recognizing what is trying to surface and allowing that surfacing, not transcending it to get away from it, but fully meeting it, so fully meeting it. We could say in truth that there's nothing there, and it's true, there is nothing there. But it doesn't help just to say there's nothing there if your direct experience is that you're in some kind of anger and reaction. Just to say there's nothing there without exploring it in your own direct experience would be to try to bypass an incredibly graced opportunity, right? You cannot borrow from anyone else's direct experience. Whatever they tell you is their truth. And that is why there can't really be teachers. We can only be in our own direct experience, right? And that is why whatever is spoken here, it is for you to receive it as a resonance, as an alive flow of guidance. And you decide, you find out, you explore, right? We can be in conversation about it. We can move in these ways that are supportive in companionship. But the autonomy is with you, and there will never be freedom if the autonomy isn't actually taken up within you to receive the glory of who you are in your direct experience. There will never be freedom if there's an imagining that your freedom depends on what someone else tells you, or when someone else tells you that you're free, or someone else tells you how it should be and how you should feel and how you should react and what your life should look like, right? Awakening to the glory of God, to pure divine wholeness, is an internal unfolding where you are alone with God until there's only God, right? This is the only way that it can unfold. So we share this, we companion, and yes, guidance comes, but guidance doesn't belong to anyone. Guidance isn't a teacher, right? Guidance is the flow of intelligence. And the flow of intelligence comes as a flow of grace, a flow of love, but you take in what brings you alive and you let go of the rest. That's why you don't need to make notes. You don't need to understand anything. It's about what brings you alive. Where are you resonating in a sense of truth? And yes, there is the possibility when autonomy is offered for the ego to come in and to interrupt that autonomy. But that within the intelligence will be tripped up at some point, right? Because essentially, if what we are longing for is freedom, is to remember the perfect love, the glorious wholeness of what we are as pure light, then we're not really interested in tricking ourselves. We can trick ourselves and we can trick ourselves, but that is never going to bring us to freedom. So in truth, what's the point, right? If there is a longing for freedom, for longing to know this truth, then we will have the willingness to be wrong. We will have the willingness to be wrong about everything that the me has believed to be true, quite simply. We will come to a situation where we are humbled out of everything that we believe to be true in the sense of the me, until all that remains is the truth, the perfect truth. And the discovery is that the perfect truth is this moment here now with no opposition. And this realization is the holy moment, the recognition of this holy moment. When we recognize the holiness of the undivided moment, true surrender happens. No more me, no more division, just the glory. It's to recognize the holiness of the moment. We are so conditioned and trained to protect and divide, and to see the projected world as somehow a perpetrator, something that we are a victim of. So we could say that we could feel like we're a victim of life, to life, that it's happening to us. And in a way, what we're speaking of is coming out of the cycle and seeing through all of the ways that we make ourselves a victim, and how we imagine that there is a perpetrator or many perpetrators that are here to cause harm. Now, to the mind, sounds like craziness, because the mind is conditioned to see things in this way, to see division, to feel like bad things are happening. I need to protect or I need to attack, right? What we are inviting is a depth of vision that can see without dividing, but it's not creating a new perspective with the mind consciousness. It's not about creating new concepts. This perspective of seeing only comes when we know the innate goodness of what we are. You are good, not as an opposite to bad. You are goodness, goodness. You are goodness. When you know your essential goodness, your essential innocence, you know the innocence and goodness of all. And this is where all that seems to be divided, diverse, multiplicity, is one source, one love, one heart, one self, one light, right? And this is what we are being invited. Every moment is an invitation to see clearly and to stay in allegiance with that spark of remembering that is already awake and alive inside us, inside our own presence. And so in this unfolding, what is so glorious is that we can ask all of the questions. We can bring forward all of the places that we want to divide, that we want to oppose, we want to resist. And we can use the conversations and the inquiries to see through where our protections are, where our divisions are, that we can, in that, come to a more and more skilled way of giving up our need to be right, our need to hold the protection, the need to hold the me in division, in separation. What we come to discover is that victim and perpetrator are one, that truly the perpetrator is the mind. But we can only come to this revelation, this glorious revelation, when we are diving into the depths of our innermost experience and we're willing to meet all of our resistances, even to this possibility, that we're willing to meet our resistances and inquire through it. But at the same time, we're also willing to be completely true in direct experience, in the living of life, that there's a complete allowing of an unedited flowing as life. But we are using the flow of life and what happens as a way of being aware of what is arising, what is surfacing, what is trying to come forward to be released. And that we can allow, by meeting the sensations in the nervous system that are discordant, resistant, and allow these discordant patternings to come forward into the presence of love, where there's total open allowing, where everything is welcome, where we're not dividing the moment. We are the openness in true nature. We're the openness, and everything is welcome. And then we get to see, well, what is not welcome here? We don't pretend everything is welcome. We're not creating spiritual moods. There's absolutely no point in that. We're just finding out, well, what isn't welcome? I'm not bothered by that. Oh, then you start feeling in your nervous system, actually, I am bothered by that, right? We're coming to such a radical honesty within our inner functioning in every moment. What's happening here? What's happening here? But not in a way of, let's say, where the mind can get very serious and restrictive and constrained within this idea of doing the work. But there can be like interceptors of the mind that are actually just modes of protection that are not really truly allowing. So this invitation is just to come to the sense of the being, the presence, your own presence, that which knows, because that which knows is kind and patient, is natural compassion, natural openness, is not critical, is not fearful, is not unkind. All of the unkind, critical, fearful voices are interceptors of layers of the mind that are just other layers of protection trying to assert their authority and their wanting really to be separate from God, holding this sense of separation, holding a sense of opposition from oneness. All of our protections are a kind of opposition to the natural wholeness, the natural innocence. And we can't trust really anything that the mind says. And we have to test this within our own inner functioning. How we come to test this is we say, what is aware of the moving, changing that is not changing, right? What is not changing here? We want to find what is not changing. What is still and unmoving here? And that we can confirm in the direct experience, the unchanging, unmoving presence of being. And we can confirm that this simple presence, this sense of being, it doesn't have criticism. It doesn't have fear. It's not unkind. It doesn't have any agenda or opinions or judgments about this moment. That there is this openness here. That this is the true essential nature, the simplicity of being, and that we can know this directly in our innermost being and just be here, simply be here. And there's the direct recognition that can confirm that there is an openness, a naturalness, that there's just no agenda here. And that this agendaless openness, there is a sense of freedom and spaciousness, a sense of naturalness. Hear the silence, hear the stillness. And there's this resonance of a knowing of yourself here that is the simple truth, where the confirmation is in the direct experience only referring to the direct knowing of your own presence, that you're not referring to anyone or anything for confirmation, that the confirmation is this inner autonomy, this inner knowing, and that this is precious. This is where the surrender is. This is where the allegiance with truth is. And it is through the recognition of this that really the life lived is about bringing everything that is discordant to this stillness, bringing everything to this silence. That we are coming to an awareness of that the mind is purely a flow of discordant consciousness that is in holding patterns that act as protection, conditioning, resistance, that all of these protections are innocent. But if we believe the mind's stories and learned knowledge that we are holding an allegiance and commitment to division, we can only come to the collaboration and commitment to truth when we can feel the direct experience within our own presence and confirm a sense of truth and knowing that is clear. Because this is the source of all. This is the stillness, the silence before the projection. This is the freedom and simplicity. This is true safety. The play of the life, of my life, is so much about not really being with what is, but being with what feels safe. And creating strategies to keep the me safe. Creating protections to keep the me safe. But what happens if we open to not maintaining that sense of false safety, really, which is protection, and we open to the true safety of the unmoving, unchanging presence. And from here, from this knowing, we can open to surface and release all of the places that are holding a false sense of safety. Where there is fear, there is the mind. Where there is a sense of lack, something missing, there is the mind. And these are all the ways that protection plays out. There's nothing that we can do or have to do. But if we feel that we have a choice, it is to choose the simplicity and openness of presence, of love, and not choose the habit of fear, not choose the habit of being a victim that feels threatened, that can be harmed, right? We have to choose the allegiance with love. We could say that very simply. Either you're choosing fear or you're choosing love. That either you're in the wide open glory of the love, or there is something that is trying to surface into love, right? Either you're in the direct openness of the being and the clarity, or there is a movement attempting to free itself and come to this love. It's all that's ever really happening. So if there is a contraction, if there is resistance, if there is upset, stress in the moment, it's to recognize that this is just some kind of patterning, some old stress trying to surface, to come to the light, to come to love, to come to its true nature. Anything that feels resistant, restricted, upset, hurt, angry, whatever it's arising as, whatever flavor it's arising as, it is something trying to surface out of the unconscious and come to the light, the love, the presence of what is. The transmutation can only happen when within our direct experience we choose the love, we choose the being. We have to, in the moment, choose the allegiance, the collaboration with truth. You have to find out what is true here, now. You have to find the holiness of the moment, because it is in the holiness of the moment that natural surrender happens. And by holiness, we mean the truth or the wholeness, the purity, the innocence. Where is that in this moment? Because as we illuminate and resonate as this, knowing, everything that is not real collapses, because everything that is not real is just an image on a screen. It's like we receive and we accept that we are making a projection onto a screen and we're believing the projection. We're not accepting our deep, true responsibility for that projection, that we have complete responsibility for the projection of our life, everything that arises in it. And of course, coming to that complete responsibility, it takes a maturity. It takes a certain amount of adeptness in this unfolding, to come to accept complete responsibility, like 100% responsibility for the projection, in the recognition that whatever is on the screen is the content of my mind. Whatever is on the screen is the mind of the me. Are we willing to give it up? Right? The me is committed to reinforcing that and holding it. But that is the separation. So that is why we can't create resolution within that play, because it doesn't really exist. It only exists to the mind that is believing in it. We can only find resolution when we see the image on the screen and we receive its reflection. And to start with, this looks like feeling the feelings, receiving the sensations, being present with whatever's arising without projecting, blaming, attacking, and pointing it either outward or in an unkind way through shame and guilt to yourself, right? That when we can truly be here, so present as presence itself, where there's a natural acceptance of complete responsibility, because this functioning is known within the intelligence, it's known within the unified field. This is the natural seeing in unity consciousness, is that it's all one, and that hopefully we would start to come to a sense of the impersonal. But if it still feels personal, we have to be honest about our functioning. We can't transcend away into idealistic ideas of what this consciousness is or where we're living. We have to be completely real. What is your direct experience? What is happening for you? Be honest with yourself and stop trying to be somewhere that you're not, imagining yourself somewhere that you're not, because that is just a mind's habit to distract and delay, right? The mind is very adept at using specialness to distract and delay away from actually facing your whole self, right? If we cannot face this whole moment completely, whatever it includes, and if our moment includes any kind of upset, reactions, stress, judgments, then we're still in process, right? So that includes pretty much everyone, right? So let us be honest. There's absolutely no benefit from using a mind strategy to default away from this moment into seeming transcendent states, which are just subtle strategies of the mind creating division through specialness, right? We have to be so ready to be wrong, so ready to uproot every single fiber of our being that wants to be special. To know that specialness in any way, especially spiritual specialness, is a strategy of the mind that has to be seen through if there is to be freedom. Right. If we are holding ourselves divided for any reason at all, then we want to explore what is going on there. It is very likely that there is something repressed, suppressed, that there are old stresses still in holding patterns, and seeing the distraction, seeing this habit to divide is an opportunity to meet these places. Now, we only meet these places when there's the maturity and the readiness. Right? There is only one. There is only one. And the one is love, is the glory, is God. And our inner unfolding is unfolding into the absolute unquestionable knowing of the innocence, the holiness, the holy wholeness of the one truth that is true for all. There is not another truth that is a higher truth, a better truth. Again, we want to just have such an awareness within our functioning that the mind is so slippery, so sneaky. And as we mature, we actually mature into a greater and greater ordinariness. Really, where the divinity of what we are is so present right on the surface of life, that it is that our lived human experience is the absolute light and transparency of complete openness, like a complete revealment in a way. That we're not holding protection or division. We're not holding a specialness. We're not holding a sense of being better than. And we're not holding, of course, a sense of having any lack. That we're just this openness. There's not someone here that is divided. There's not a me in my life. That there's just this, just as it is. And that every moment of the life lived is a moment to watch the screen. And if there's anything on the screen that there is resistance to, receive the grace of the resistance. Receive the grace of however that resistance is arising, and allow the unraveling in the nervous system to release the discordant patterning, the deeply held vibrations that are like repression and suppression. Let all of this release so that the oneness, the one, can be known in the heart as the self, as God, as the grace, as perfect, unconditional love, right? Perfect, unconditional love is really just the absolute openness, the absolute revealed openness, where there's no hiding, there's no sense of a persona, there's no sense of resistance, restriction, protection, that we're being invited to come to a greater and greater openness, which is really natural authenticity, where there's nothing to hide, where I have nothing to hide from you, you have nothing to hide from me, right? And that we just use it as an opportunity. Well, why would I hide that? Why would I hide that? Interesting, right? Opportunity, nothing wrong, nothing bad. But we're here to, in our maturing, in the refinement, to dissolve any subtle edges, any subtle boundaries, any subtle ways that we have of dividing, and to inquire into what is that? so that we can live in a depth of freedom and autonomy within this knowing, where we're not moving according to any external ideas, that we're living this freedom, that we don't, that the life doesn't depend, let's say our connection to love doesn't depend on getting that love from anyone else, getting permission from anyone else, doesn't depend on behaving in certain ways of protection or limitation, that we keep opening in greater and greater honesty and willingness to meet what happens in our relationship dynamics when we're really honest. Are we ready and willing to face what happens? Are we willing to face what fears come up? You know, what gives the courage to meet life in this truly unguarded way is the depth of being that we are resting in. Because the depth of being, when the depth of recognition and remembrance confirms, this is unmoving, this that I am is unmoving, this that I am doesn't change, this that I am is not affected by life's ups and downs, this that I am is absolutely free. And the glory is to know this. Now, if we open to this freedom and nothing ever arises on the screen that creates a reaction or a resistance, then great glory, alleluia, right? We don't need to conjure up any kind of problems. But if there's anything on the screen that is bothering you, there's the opportunity. And the opportunity is, great glory, is that it doesn't take you away from the beauty of your divine open heart. True nature is that as the protections fall away, the glory of your knowing deepens, right? It's all one. It's all one natural mechanistic functioning. But it's as if we have to come to this adeptness and willingness, like a maturity, we could say, where our choosing of God, our choosing of truth is deep enough that we're willing to pull in the projections and actually live this to the depth that we keep testing it. Now, companionship and support is here. And share your experiments, share what you're noticing, right? Because this is how the wisdom starts to come forward at every point, right? We cannot live this freedom if we are somehow bound in the idea that anything external has a power over us. We have to come to the recognition of true power, and we have to move through this constant rebalancing within our own lived experience, where we see through every story, right? Where we see through every story on the screen, even the spiritual ones, right? We have to see through the ways that the characters in our lives play. They play roles of power imbalance and manipulation, right? We have to come to a depth of knowing within our own direct experience where we're not reliant upon approval, where we're not allowing ourselves to be subtly manipulated because we're needing to keep connection, where we're needing something. So we can come to an exploration of being in relation, communion in God, in truth, in love. That in a way we all have a longing for this truth, right? That we meet in the longing to live this truth, to know God. And we join in this, in the light. and the willingness to live this and to keep saying yes, to keep saying yes to truth, keep saying yes to collaboration with truth, collaboration with openness, collaboration with the complete seeing through of the dream, right? In a way, we meet on a certain level in the dream in order to meet not in the dream, right? So we meet kind of in the dream and not in the dream. So the big picture that we bring forward is freedom from the dream. And we have to bring forward the big picture that doesn't make sense to the mind in order for the remembrance to happen that there is a truth and a freedom that is not of this world, but that can be lived in this life, right? That we can live the eternal, timeless, perfect love in absolute knowing of the glory of God in this lifetime. So it's like we meet in the dream in order to move the patterns of consciousness and stir and enliven, point and support in order to open to the possibility of complete freedom from the dream. Mm. Mm. That it's not about goals, intentions, or arrival. It's about this moment here now, the living aliveness and awakeness of this moment. What is this, just as it is? And the greatest opportunity to meet anything and everything that might feel like a divide, a separation, a belief. That it's not about anyone or anything. It's about seeing through every single story. That as we see through the stories, we find an autonomy within our own knowing, and we meet here. And you can't fake this. You can't fake this with the mind coming to its idea of autonomy and thinking that, oh, I've arrived here and this is where I'm seeing from, because it's so transparent when it's protection. Because true love doesn't need any pretenses. True love is total revealment. True love doesn't need to be seen in any particular way. True love is the undivided wholeness where we are one. Right? And the invitation is just to keep meeting anything and everything that is conspiring to keep the dream of separation alive, and the protections, which are really that flow of polarity away from God, right? Are you turning away from God? Are you turning away from truth? Are your choices to stay in the fear and the division? Or are you using your choice card to choose God, to choose love, to choose to collaborate where there's no division, which is in your heart, in the heart of truth, no division, no better than, no worse than, no higher than, no good, no bad, just pure essential goodness, goodness, goodness.